Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Charitable and Home Care. Very glad you are joining us, however you may be joining us. And here at this wonderful time of year, this very magical, this very merry time of year, good things happen. We love cold weather. We enjoy cold weather. However, when that weather gets really cold, there's a lot of people paying attention about what they need to do to make sure that we have what we need. One of those people, Ms. Paula Rome. Paula, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
And of course, Paula is the customer service manager of the Bayou region for Entergy in Louisiana, right?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So we hear cold weather, we get excited. You hear cold weather and you think,
I have to work.
I know that's right. And so it's just one of those things. And so we're thankful and appreciative that you guys are always thinking about it, being prepared for. But I don't know that people always understand why it is that Entergy is concerned about what's happening with these cold weather storms. Explain that for us a little bit.
So, Keith, there's two things that Entergy is concerned about with cold weather. The first is obviously when there's cold weather, people turn on their heaters.
Right.
And your heater actually pulls more energy than your air conditioner does. So the load capacity, everybody turn on their heaters and running their heaters nonstop does hit our grid. It does affect our load. So that's the number one concern with cold weather. The number two concern is when we have snow or ice and precipitation. What I've learned is that when we have snow or ice in our lines, just 1/2 an inch of snow or ice in our line equates to 500 pounds on our lines. So
1/2 inch of snow or ice can equal 500 pounds.
To our lines, yes.
And so I don't know that people understand that. And so we want cold weather, but when it gets cold weather down here, we always have humidity and we often have precipitation with it. We don't get a cold weather without a cold weather system.
Correct.
That often has precipitation. If that precipitation is still around, when it starts to freeze, you guys have issues with the lines.
Correct. So that's what causes our lines to break and have problems with the lines. Hopefully, what we're hearing from our weathermen is that we will have extreme cold temperatures, but no precipitation, which means no ice or snow, which could affect our lines. So hopefully that is what we are preparing for, and that's what we are expecting, is not to have any precipitation. So that is good news from our point of view, because that means we have to deal with the load side of things and not the precipitation side, which is much easier to deal with.
Right. And now we also have these people with some of these older homes where they don't always have really good central heat. They've got these floor heaters or they've got these other heaters. Those are putting pressure and on your lines as well, right? Right.
Anything that's plugged in. So so it's the central heat that does cause the most pull on our generation capacity. But, we have been hearing for months now from our weathermen that we will have a very cold winter. So Entergy has been preparing for months now. We have been weatherizing our systems, our lines, our power plants, insulating substations and that kind of stuff. So we have been preparing for months now to be prepared for this kind of system.
To the best of our ability.
Absolutely.
With all of the challenges that took place, 16 months ago, 17 months ago with regards to the storm.
Correct.
So that's just kind of one of those things that we're having to kind of think about as well. So you guys have been preparing for a long time for this cold weather.
We have for several months.
Okay.
To be prepared for in our big generation capacity. So from the power plants to the substations to the lines that go to your homes. We have been preparing to be prepared for this weather kind of event.
Okay. Do you guys, from an internal standpoint, do y'all start having a whole lot more meetings? Do you guys have a whole lot more discussions? And so like you said, cold weather comes, you got to go to work. Tell us a little bit about some of those discussions, those internal things that have been going on.
Absolutely. We've been having a lot of those discussions. As you know, Entergy relies on not just our generation, but we're part of the MISO network, which is around the country. So we have the capabilities to rely on them when our generation hits capacity. So we have been preparing, and we are prepared to have backup generation if our load hits capacity. So we've been preparing on that. And yes, we've had multiple meetings. It's almost like a storm prep. So we are prepared. A lot of people are taking time off around the holidays. So even onto that level, we know in what networks we can call people in to come and work when it becomes necessary.
And kind of help with that. And so tell us how that kind of works with that backup system. Is there have we gotten close to that? Have we gotten to a point where we were at capacity before? Is there some recent events that kind of have gotten to capacity?
Not in our area, but
Okay.
if you remember in February of 2021, Winter Storm Uri
Yes.
in Texas,
Yes.
they had some issues
Okay.
on their electrical grid.
Yeah.
And
they
that
were probably borrowing stuff from our side.
They were relying heavily on MISO.
Okay.
And they were borrowing from other capacities around the United States for that reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And so it's just one of those things. I love the fact, I brag all the time about what Terrebonne and Lafourche and the neighboring parishes, St. Mary, how well they work together. This is another great example of how we just kind of have to lend on our neighbors a little bit sometimes when we get to these big weather storms.
And, something we also have in our favor here in Lafourche and Terrebonne, I work with the Lafourche networks, the Terrebonne networks, but I also work into St. Charles Parish, is that, in the St. Charles area, they have the river to deal with.
Right.
And they have the state highways and the bridges and that kind of stuff. In the St. Charles network, they are planning to have trucks stationed on both sides of the river in case we can't cross the Luling Bridge.
You guys have to kind of reach out, and y'all have to do a great deal of work with lots of different disciplines, lots of different municipalities. Talk a little bit about how that goes.
Yeah, Keith, so we have to work very closely with the parish governments. That's a big role of mine to do.
Okay.
That way, if we have an event that we do have a power outage, we need to know, what the parishes are doing to clear the roads and that
Right.
kind of thing to make it safe. So as soon as our trucks are able to get on the road, we can to restore power.
Now let's talk about trucks getting on the road, because I think very often people just think, oh, well, the power went out. They need to go fix this right now. Let's talk about some of the safety measures that need to be in place to do that.
Yeah, so it is very dangerous. We cannot, our guys have to get in a bucket, right?
Yeah.
And people don't realize that we cannot get in a bucket until the winds are below 30 mile per hour. And so a lot of our customers don't realize that because they expect, when they place that call, the power's out, we're automatically just all of a sudden get on the road.
Right.
But we can't get in a bucket truck until it's under 30 mile per hour winds. And that is a concern of mine for this storm because we are hearing that this may be a high wind event, not necessarily a precipitation event, but a high wind event.
Right, and it's just one of those things that I think all of the people who are watching and listening need to know that they need to be safe as well.
Correct.
Your workers need to be safe, and being in a bucket truck, even at 30 mile an hour winds or 25 mile an hour winds, that's significant. And there's some 12 to 15, 20 feet in the air doing this kind of work for us to get our electricity back. We want electricity to come back as soon as we can, but that's just one of those things that we need to be aware of because this is going to be a high wind and cold weather event.
Yes, and it will last over multiple days, too.
Right. It's not like it's going to be a one-time event. It's going to keep, and wind doesn't just really stop. Like it'll gust, but we've got some pretty significant sustained winds that are expected.
That is
From
correct.
what the weathermen are telling us, right?
Yes, from what they're telling us.
High wind.
Hopefully they're
low
correct.
participate. Yeah, we want them to be right.
want them to be right.
We want to have wind, not necessarily rain and precipitation
That's right.
or snow. at
So
this
it takes
point.
a lot of work. I mean,
Right.
we have to work very closely with the public works departments, with Gordy, Archie, in Lafourche and Terrebonne Parish, the EOCs, Earl Hughes in Terrebonne Parish. At this point, we're hearing from the EOCs. They're sending out daily alerts on what the weather and what they're hearing and what to expect in the local parishes. And, that's critical for us.
Right.
And so if there is a big event, we're hearing directly from them, and Entergy is showing up at the EOCs to give updates on what's going on.
Yeah, it was just one of those things, and so I'm so very glad we talk about this all the time. For anything that's going on in our parishes, it's so nice to be able to have those centrally located EOC areas and meetings to be able to be a part of that, and just be able to make a plan with the decision makers in the room.
Right.
The people that need to, when they say, hey, what can Entergy do about this? They can answer that question right away.
Correct.
Right? And be able to do that. Go ahead.
And it works. I mean, we work as a good team because it takes state police, local police to help because
Right. Sheriff's office.
when it's an event and the power's out and you have one of these events going on, we need the local and state police available because our guys are not only in a truck. You're talking about safety, but they're in a truck way up in the air and the lights are out and it could be dark, and so we need the police to help direct traffic, keep a perimeter around our guys with the lights on to keep them safe as well.
And look, one of the things we learned this Christmas week, all week long, we've had limited sunshine.
Yes.
So even when it's during the day, it very well may be dark. are much darker than it normally is when we have, rays of sunshine.
That's things we don't think about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So very important to be able to kind of coordinate that. It's nice to see that y'all are coordinating with all of those entities, and especially through the EOC. But I mean, we have so many different individual municipalities. I think about Lockport. I think about the city of Houma. Two different police departments inside of the parish sheriff's office, and so we have these kind of different lines, if you will, to deal with. You guys are dealing with lines, but they're also dealing with lines of service. And you got to coordinate that with all of them. That's kind of what you do and specialize in.
Correct. And when there is a big outage, we also work closely with Terrebonne Parish Utilities as well.
Oh, right. And just kind of, because it's one of those things where, that people are calling and asking, hey, do you know electricity's out? Well, yeah, we know. Yeah, we're doing what we can about it. And
Right.
I know everybody's always so patient about that, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Well, in the most recent storm we had with the tornado that hit on Cleveland Street,
Right.
we had an issue that that Entergy had an outage on the east side of Houma, but we couldn't fix that issue until Terrebonne Utilities fixed their one pole that was involved in the outage.
Sustained
so we have to
damage
work
from that.
very closely together.
Yeah, and so again, it's a really good point, because I don't know that people always realize, like, oh, well, I've got energy, it's their fault. It's like,
Right.
well, hold on. There's a lot more moving parts to it than
Correct.
that. And so
Correct.
sometimes we have to kind of realize, and it's not red tape, it's a process. We got to follow the process. We got to make sure we do it safely as
Correct.
well.
And while we're talking about that, it's very important to note that if power lines do go down for this kind of storm, of course, please stay away from the live power lines. They are very dangerous. We always think about power lines and water, but power lines and cold temperatures are just as dangerous. So
Right.
don't ever go around live power lines.
Well, and quite frankly, when it's that cold, with the amount of humidity we have, there's some water somewhere. And so
Yes.
live wires are very dangerous.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure that we don't have some major injury or illness or death because of that. But there's a lot of things that people can do individually. You were talking about what really impacts and makes a difference for capacity and load and those kinds of things. Talk a little bit about maybe some of the things that people can do to make this better for themselves.
So what you can do in your own personal homes is, one, try not to put your heater as high as possible.
Yeah, let's not put 90 or 92.
No, please don't. Please don't.
That makes me sweat just thinking about it.
I mean, we recommend to keep your home during the day about 68, maybe a little bit lower at night if you can take it. Put a sweater on or something during the day. Put
Yeah,
a
some
blanket
clothes.
on.
Snuggle
it's
up.
Christmas time.
That's right.
Snuggle up on the couch.
Get a Snuggie.
Exactly. They have some nice throw blankets out
Yeah.
and about right now for Christmas
Plush
time.
throw
Exactly.
blankets.
Use some energy efficiency techniques. Wash your clothes in cold water instead of hot water.
Okay.
So you don't have to heat up the hot water heater as often.
Okay.
Cook foods at the lowest possible setting. Refrain from opening that oven door too much when you're baking to let the hot electric heat out. Look for any ways not to let the warm air out or the cold air in.
Okay.
So,
So good weatherization, right?
Good weatherization.
Okay.
So you want to winterize your house. So chalking or putting the weather strips on your doors and windows will help a ton.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things I thought of this morning is we have a brick home on a slab, but I thought, in my living room I have 3 big windows on the back side of my house, but I have the patio. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to hang some visqueen on the patio so the wind doesn't get close to my windows. So just some
that's an
things like that to
interesting
kind of
idea.
block the wind from getting close.
Right.
And I know I have those 3 big windows. So the wind doesn't get close to my windows and kind of keep that cold air from getting close to my living room.
And it really does, too. That wind will make a huge difference blowing during the day. So that's a really, really important point. Just some simple things, right?
like that. Yeah.
Very good.
Obviously, be very careful if you're using space heaters and that kind of thing. That can help warm up your home, but use some common sense with that and not put any clothes or blankets close to it. Anything you want to use some fire hazards.
Right. Just
be careful with that.
Be smart about
Be
that.
smart with
Make
those
sure you
kind
don't
of
put things in front of those.
Correct. And then, some other electrical tips. You don't want to plug space heaters into power strips. You want to put it directly into the wall, things like that, to be careful.
Yeah.
We don't want a winter cold event to turn into house fires.
Yeah, that's absolute last thing that we need.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine that had a house fire because of one of those things they couldn't control. Let's not create a house fire by something we can control.
Correct. And a lot of things people do, for some reason, sometimes we think to turn on the oven and open the oven door to do some heat, that doesn't really help you out much. Your oven and your heater in your house, your central heat, pull a lot of voltage. So leaving your heater on is probably better. Don't leave the oven door open. That's not safe.
Yeah, it's really unsafe, and it's just not efficient. It's not going to work.
No.
You're just pulling a whole lot more electricity that's making a difference for you providing the electricity versus the warmth you're going to get from the heat,
Correct.
the oven.
And what we all should be doing right now is thinking like we do when a hurricane's coming. We should be prepared to have the normal things around, candles, flashlights, in case we go out of power. With a winter storm, we should be prepared to have alternate sources of heat, even if that's just extra blankets and sleeping bags around. If you have a fireplace in your home, make sure you have, if it's gas, great. If it's a wood-burning fireplace, make sure you have wood and things like that on hand. And also keep in mind, if we do have some precipitation and the roads will freeze, things to keep in mind: do you have groceries? Do you have what you need at home to better sustain for a day or two in case you can't get on the roads?
Had another recommendation. It was really interesting. People don't always think about it, but something that I learned from Chris Pulaski, that fill your tank completely up. Make sure it's full. And the reason is because when it gets so cold, condensation may build up on the inside of your tank, and then once that condensation melts, it becomes water. You can get water in your carburation system of your vehicle.
I didn't think about that.
No, neither did I. And, my wife, I went and filled up both vehicles yesterday. It was kind of my job last night. And so I'm glad that I did, but it's just one of those things that we can do. Fill your tank up for two reasons. So you have enough gas to get where you need to go when it's time, when the roads are safe, and so you prevent any problems in your gas tank with any condensation freezing.
And you know what else? My uncle is a mechanic, and he has always told me this: if you ever get in your car in the morning when it's really, really cold and the air pressure is low, I keep an air tank at home.
Okay.
To just kind of top off the air in your tires.
Right, making sure that you have enough air. The other
Correct.
thing that was told, I did not know this. State troopers always help me learn something all the time. When you get into your vehicle and you're really ready to cool it off, don't wait for the car to heat up before you turn the heater on. Turn that heater on right away so you don't have a major change from cold to hot. It can really impact, the condensation can build up, it can break your windshield.
Yeah.
So, especially
Good
if it's on
thoughts.
defrost. So, some really good things to learn. I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to add as we close out, Ms.
Anything
Paula?
to keep the warm air in and the cold air out. Put some thick curtains, hang some blankets on your windows, anything to keep the warm air in, cold air out.
Hang some Visqueen if you need to.
Visqueen,
Make
whatever it
sure that
takes.
you're protecting some of those doors. You need to put a towel down by one of those doors. If you don't have time to caulk it or weatherize it, put a big beach blanket, beach towel down there. Prevent that. Keep the cold air hot. Keep the warm air in. And if we're keeping the cold out, we're keeping the warm in, we're going to be much safer. We can listen to all the things that you've recommended to us, Paula, and
Correct.
understand that wind is okay. We don't want much precipitation.
That's right.
So no snow is good for you, right?
That's
No
correct.
snow's the way to go.
No snow's the way to go.
Very good. Paula, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it
Thank
so
you for
very
having
much.
me.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that'll do it for this particular segment of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming here on HTV.